Today, we're diving into a developing story that brings together complex legal battles, international diplomacy, and the very personal, tumultuous journey of one individual. It's a deep dive into the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Our mission today, to explore the latest developments, the unique and frankly quite surprising circumstances around his potential deportation, and what this case might tell us about broader U.S. immigration policy. And this is all based on a breaking news report from Lift Now W from FLX, including an email they obtained from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE.
It really is remarkable how quickly these things can change in the immigration world, and how one person's legal case can suddenly put a pretty small, distant nation right onto the global stage. It really shows you that interplay between individual stories and, big international policy decisions.
Absolutely. And the latest bombshell here, the thing that really shifts the focus, Kilmar Abrego Garcia is now set to be deported to the small African nation of Eswatini. I mean, that's a destination that probably isn't top of mind for most people thinking about U.S. deportations, makes it particularly interesting. So this breaking news comes straight from a new email from ICE, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Fox News got hold of it through their correspondent, Bill Malugan. And this email, sent right to Abrego Garcia's lawyers, explicitly says ICE plans to deport him to Eswatini. So there's no ambiguity there. They're clearly stating their intent, laying out the next steps.
And the destination itself, Eswatini, is really worth focusing on for a moment. For anyone wondering, it's a tiny landlocked kingdom in southern Africa, sandwiched between South Africa and Mozambique. It used to be called Swaziland. Usually you hear about deportations going to countries with more, let's say, direct links to the person, Central or South America perhaps, or even specific African countries like Uganda, which, interestingly, was the previous plan in this very case. So yeah, this switch to Eswatini is definitely unexpected, raises questions about the thinking behind it.
Right. And it's not like this decision was made lightly or by just anyone. The email points to the office of the principal legal advisor within ICE, working under the Department of Homeland Security, DHS. So you've got significant federal agencies involved here. It carries weight. But the big question still hanging there for me is why? Why Eswatini specifically? It feels almost random. The email does give a clue, though. It mentions Abrego Garcia claimed fear of persecution or torture in Uganda, and also in 20-plus other countries, including, it says, much of Central and South America. So if he named all those places, why land on Eswatini, which seemingly has no connection to him?
That's the core of it, isn't it? And ICE's own explanation in that email is, well, it's pretty direct. They state that his claims of fear regarding those many other countries are hard to take seriously. That phrase, hard to take seriously, coming from ICE, is quite telling. See, in immigration law, claiming fear triggers a whole process, an evaluation. If ICE is dismissing those claims so bluntly, it suggests they felt there wasn't enough credible evidence, or maybe consistency, in what he presented about those particular countries. And this might hint at a strategy from ICE's perspective. Think about it. If someone claims fear in lots of the usual destination countries, it can slow things down, create legal hurdles. By picking a place like Eswatini, where Abrego Garcia hasn't made a claim of fear that ICE finds credible, they might be trying to sidestep those potential legal challenges. It makes you, the listener, maybe ponder how an individual's right to state their case gets balanced against an agency's power to choose where they send someone, especially when it's somewhere so far removed.
That's a really interesting take on their possible strategy. So connecting this back to his overall case, which has already had so many twists, how significant is this Eswatini decision? Because remember, it was just last month the Trump administration was planning to send him, Abrego Garcia, who's 30 years old, to Uganda. Going from Uganda to Eswatini, that's a pretty drastic change. It really underlines how fluid these situations are.
Yeah, fluid is one word for it. This whole thing has been incredibly complicated. Wasn't there a judge involved recently? I recall reading a judge ruled the government couldn't just strip him of his right to a criminal trial here, and specifically on August 25th, forbade them from moving him out of the U.S. at all. That court order then led to an emergency hearing, right? Just adding more legal layers.
Exactly. That judge's ruling was a pivotal moment. It really emphasized that core principle of due process, the right to a trial, even for someone facing deportation. When the government wants to remove someone, especially if there are criminal charges involved, you always have this tension between, enforcing immigration law and protecting an individual's legal rights. This kind of back and forth we're seeing between the executive branch doing its thing and the court stepping in, it's actually pretty common in these complex cases. It shows how these legal fights can dramatically shape someone's future and how judges act as a check on government power.
And his personal situation sounds like a real roller coaster. He surrendered to ICE in Baltimore after getting out of jail in Tennessee. There was this description of it being the closest he had been to freedom since something happened back in March. Really highlights the personal toll. But that freedom, it was brief. Now he's detained again, facing this new deportation order. Just a relentless cycle, it seems. Shows the immense strain people in his position are under. So, with all these specifics about his case, the question becomes, is this just a one-off, really unusual situation, or could Abrego Garcia's case actually be showing us part of a larger pattern, maybe an evolving trend in U.S. deportations?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there is data suggesting it's not entirely isolated. We've got information from the Associated Press that helps paint a bigger picture here. The AP reported that back in July, the U.S. deported 5 men, all with criminal records, to Eswatini. Yes, the same country. And in that same month, another 8 men were sent to South Sudan. Plus, Rwanda apparently signaled it's willing to take in up to 250 migrants deported from the U.S. So, no, these don't look like isolated incidents. It points towards a more, perhaps, systematic effort by the U.S. to find new countries willing to receive deportees.
Wow, okay. So multiple deportations to Eswatini already this summer. These kinds of arrangements, where countries like the U.S. look for other nations to take deportees, must involve some pretty complex diplomacy behind the scenes. How do these agreements actually come about? And what's in it for the receiving countries, like Eswatini or Rwanda? What challenges do they face?
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge and often not very public part of managing global migration. Getting these agreements in place involves serious diplomatic effort, usually between the U.S. State Department and the governments of those nations. The exact details are often kept quiet, but you can imagine things like financial aid, development projects, maybe other diplomatic incentives being part of the deal. But for the receiving countries, it's not simple either. They face challenges integrating these individuals, just the basic logistics of arrival, and sometimes dealing with concerns from their own citizens about accepting deportees. It really opens up questions about fairness, mutual benefit, and the long-term impact on everyone involved in this global system.
It's clear that Abrego Garcia's case, whatever individual details, has definitely become politically charged. He's sort of emerged as a central figure in the ongoing debate over President Trump's immigration policies. And you see two very different narratives forming around him. On one hand, critics of the administration see his case as a warning sign, a sort of harbinger, they say, of what might happen with increased IC activity. Their worry is that the push for more arrests and deportations, people who might have legitimate claims or rights, could get swept up in it all. They point to the twists and turns as evidence of a potentially flawed system. But then on the other side, you have supporters of the administration. They focus on the criminal allegations against him, arguing those are grounds enough to prevent him from staying in the U.S., that he should face trial potentially elsewhere if deported. They emphasize things like rule of law, national security, saying those have to be the priority. It really just shows how polarized the whole immigration debate is, how the same situation gets viewed through such different lenses.
It absolutely does. This deep dive really crystallizes how one individual story can become this potent symbol in these huge, divisive policy arguments. Abrego Garcia's journey touches on everything. Due process, agency enforcement power, international diplomacy.
Yeah.
It's all there. And, our goal here isn't to say one side is right or wrong. It's more about understanding how different groups look at the same set of facts and come to such different conclusions based on their underlying concerns about immigration, justice, and government authority. It shows how one person's very difficult path can end up at the center of a national conversation.
It certainly has been quite a journey we've tracked today. From that initial startling news about deportation to Eswatini, tracing back through the legal fights, the earlier plan for Uganda, all the way to these broader trends and the political significance, it really connects the dots between the personal and the systemic.
Absolutely. This look at Kilmar Abrego Garcia's case, it really does pull back the curtain on that complex web connecting international agreements, legal definitions, and ultimately individual human lives caught at the border. It kind of leaves you wondering, doesn't it? With these agreements constantly shifting and countries being chosen as destinations, what actually makes a receiving nation appropriate or safe in this complicated world of global migration? And what kind of challenges does that whole process pose for everyone involved, the individual, the sending country, the receiving country, in trying to reach outcomes that are, well, fair and just?
A lot to think about there. What stands out most to you about this whole situation? We'll be back soon with another deep dive.